Good morning to all of you. It's great to see you this Lutheran Day and participating in our time together. Our next speaker should be very familiar to most of you. Representative Greg Harris was the recipient of the 2019 Paul Simon Courage in Public Service Award. Representative Harris is the majority leader of the Illinois House of Representatives and serves as chairman of the Rules Committee, and serves on the Appropriation Human Services Committee and Wage and Rates Subcommittee, among other positions. Representative Harris keenly understands the work of human service providers. He's here today to give us not only some insights into legislation impacting those issues that impact our work, but also to provide a broader overview on the most recent session of the General Assembly. Thank you, Representative Harris, for your time today. But also personally and professionally, thank you. As you exit and retire into that next thing, that great thing that you'll be doing, I want to thank you and show appreciation. You've stood in the gap, and the gap at many times has been wide and deep. You've stood in the gap in matters of equity, access, and sustainability for human service. Thank you.
And thank you, Mark. And also everyone who's here. I see a lot of familiar faces on this call, and you talk about standing in the gap. The kind of services that your organizations and your houses of worship have provided, through some of the darkest times our state has had recently. And I'm not just talking about the recent COVID pandemic. I'm talking about under the last governor, when we had no budget for 2 years, and you got by on literally a wing and a prayer, providing services to those who were most in need, so that nobody got left behind. We're all just so grateful to be able to be partners with you. So it's very nice to be here, and I appreciate the invitation. And there are a couple things that I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to talk about the state budget we have passed. This is now the fourth balanced budget that the state has passed in a row. And while we balanced it, we're really proud that we were fiscally responsible, but we're also really proud that this was a socially responsible budget. I mean, while we were taking care of cleaning up our financial mess that the state of Illinois has found itself in for many years, we always kept an eye on being sure that nobody was left behind, and we were able to make substantial increases in human services. We were able to add $350 million into our local school districts to reduce the school districts' reliance on property taxes. We gave 5% increases to higher ed and workforce training. We were able to provide a huge increase for public safety, not only for hiring and training of police officers, but $250 million toward addressing the root causes of violence, which are a long-term approach to dealing with the inequities that our society has created, to allow people to find a better path and to have appropriate housing and wraparound services and support and good paying jobs, so that lives are changed for not just immediately, but for generations. We've also put substantial money into violence interruption programs. And in my community, this has made a huge difference. I live in the uptown neighborhood of the city of Chicago, and getting these violence interrupters out on our streets has just so much brought down the level of the feuding and the shooting that we've traditionally seen on some of our streets. And if you're not familiar with the program, violence interruption programs, hire people who are coming out of the correction system, who are returning citizens, who have lived experience. They arm them with allies and tools and resources to go out in the neighborhood and person by person address the youth who've experienced a lot of this trauma, and be sure that they don't re-traumatize themselves and they don't re-traumatize the community in the process. If there's a shooting or an incident, these folks are there to intervene, make sure there's no retaliations. And so that's a thing that has produced good short-term results, making sure our law enforcement are better funded and better trained are going to be important, but making the big investment in the root causes of the violence we see is going to be the thing over a period of years that's going to make a huge difference for us. And then another thing that I'm particularly proud of, and I know I see ICOI on here and I see LSSI on here, obviously with Mark, that the industry put together is coming out of COVID. We all know the statistics about just the terrible deterioration in folks' mental health that came from the lockdowns and losing jobs and stress about taking care of their kids and how are they going to pay their bills, everything associated with the pandemic. You just saw the numbers of people seeking mental health treatment or substance abuse treatment skyrocket. And clearly, you all know the resources weren't there to accept all these people and help them when they needed it. Wait lists grew. The cost of workforce retention and acquisition went skyrocketed, and frankly our state was not doing enough to help our behavioral health providers weather this storm. So working with a coalition of all the different groups and major providers and Governor Pritzker, I'm just really happy to say that we were able to put in this year's budget, $173 million rate increase for behavioral health and substance abuse providers, the largest ever in the state's history. And it's focused on reducing wait lists. It's focused on making sure that agencies can attract and retain the right workforce, and also to emphasize trauma-informed care in our communities, so that when people come in, they're able to be seen and given the resources they need. So between that 173 million, we are, and other funds we put in for things like training in elementary and secondary schools of recognizing and triaging behavioral health problems that a teacher might see, and giving them the tools to help connect them up with an appropriate provider. Expansion of mental health services on all of our college and university campuses. The increases to behavioral health in our state budget this year are just about $250 million. And this is something that will last for each year going forward too. So very proud about those things. Also, we put in $225 million of our federal ARPA money. This is one-time money that comes along to use to acquire and redevelop affordable housing. Because one thing we know is reducing homelessness and getting people into stable housing that they can afford with the appropriate wraparound services is, again, like a long-term solution to some of these problems. You can give people all the treatment and the help that you can in an appointment with a therapist or a doctor, but if they're not housing stable, if they are trying to figure out where they're going to go and how they're going to take care of their kids every night, you're not going to get the outcomes that we all hope for. So this is one-time money. We allow us to build and preserve, literally thousands and thousands of units across the state of Illinois. So we're very happy about that. And I also talked about, the fiscal responsibility. I mean, if you've been watching the news, those of us who've been in Illinois for a while know that the financial situation of our state for years has been like the punchline of jokes on national TV shows. It just has. Our debts were so huge, we didn't pay our bills, we were a deadbeat state. Over these last couple of years, we've totally turned that around. And if you've seen the news recently, it's not just politicians, me and the governor and other people saying that. It's Wall Street and it's the credit rating agencies saying that we've received 6 credit upgrades in the last year based on balancing our budget and paying off our bills. And what that means is it frees us up hundreds of millions of dollars that we were paying in interest before now to go into programs like mental health, substance abuse, housing, and public safety. So we're not just sending it off to Wall Street and the banks, we're reinvesting it in our communities. Our bill backlog, and Mark will know this painfully because he dealt with it, in 2017 was, I think, $17 billion of unpaid bills. We're now down to, we've paid that all the way down. We're now down to $2 or $3 billion, which is essentially a 30-day pay cycle, which is, you send us a bill, we pay it within 30 days. So that's huge. We've paid down all of our borrowing. The state of Illinois no longer owes money to the federal government. We no longer have done interfund borrowing. We no longer have, all the different kind of financial tricks that we've had to use from year to year on cash flow. Illinois this year put $1 billion into our rainy day fund. This is huge. I mean, other states have always had rainy day funds so that if there is a financial downturn or if things get dicey, we don't have to cut services immediately, that we have money in reserve that we can, pay our bills and our providers. We paid $500 million above and beyond our required payment to our pension system. So we're reducing our pension liability, and that will bring us about $1.1 billion in savings over the years. And I can go on down the list, but the key thing is, we've balanced our budget, we've paid our bills, we've paid off all of our backlog of bills, we're putting money in a rainy day fund, and we're paying more toward our pension obligations than we're required because, Governor Pritzker and the legislature want to be sure that we're on sound footing. And the other thing that, we passed this year, and it actually takes effect the 1st of July when our new fiscal year begins, is we're also sending $1.8 billion in rebates and tax savings directly to Illinois families. Anyone who pays property taxes will be getting a check from the state of Illinois. There will be an expansion of the earned income tax credit, and it's a refundable credit. So even, folks at the lower end of the earning scale are going to get checks back from the state of Illinois based on their filing of income tax returns. We're eliminating the sales tax on groceries and food starting 1st of July. And there's, a reduction in the tax rate on gasoline also. So, we know people are struggling. We're trying to do the best we can to be sure we have services on the back end for folks, that we're sending out money to help families as best we can, a little on the front end. And we're, running a state that's fiscally responsible and setting ourselves up for a good future. And I could go on and on and on, but politicians often do. But I'm happy to answer any questions. That might be a better use of the time. So I really thank you for your attention this morning.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Representative Harris, and most appreciate your leadership. I have a few questions I'd like to start with. And one is just the recognition of how your leadership, how you've led the legislature in the sense of providing great supports to human services over the past many, many years, but particularly working with the administration the past 3.5 years and then this past legislative session. And so I'm just wondering, how do you hope, as you move on, how do you hope that the legislature builds on this legacy?
I hope we keep doing what we've been doing for the last couple of years. There's a real commitment to investing in our communities, and that's huge. But to do that, we've got to be sure that we have the money available and it's not going off to Wall Street to pay interest. Our credit rating is good enough that we can borrow when we need to build the affordable housing and do those kind of things. We have a really good partner right now in Governor J.B. Pritzker. His heart has always been in the human service arena and also the education arena, particularly early childhood education. That's been something he's worked on for years. And he's committed to neighborhoods. He knows that there's not like a one-size-fits-all solution for every part of the state. That what works in Uptown in Chicago may not work for Tolono down in Central Illinois or Effingham down in Southern Illinois. So he's been a great partner to work with.
And as you look ahead in the next year, is there any biggest challenge that you see that we face?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, like all the economists and, the state of Illinois hires, different economic forecasters. They give us each of these firms produces 3 different scenarios on a regular basis, what they expect to be the case, what they think would be the worst case, and what they think would be the best case as we do our financial planning. And all of them are saying that they're seeing forces at work. And you turn on the news or you go to the grocery store, you see these forces at work. But they're saying that we should really be concerned about reductions in available revenue for the state. That no one has gone so far to say there's going to be a big recession, but people see real big headwinds. So I think in this coming year, really monitoring our spending and keeping an eye on revenue and making midterm adjustments is going to be really important, because you don't want to get to the end of a fiscal year and finding out suddenly you are $800 million or $900 million short. At the end of the year, making a cut of that size is huge. If you make an adjustment early on, it's far easier for people to plan around that.
Our participants have helped over the years many times advocate for human services. And I'm wondering if you can recall a particular time when this advocacy helped inform your legislative decisions.
Oh, how much time do I have? I could go on and on about this. I mean, it's easy to say, oh, I support mental health, or I support early intervention, or all of these things. But until you have a family come into your office and they talk to you about just the complications and the nuances, as legislators, we think, well, we make this policy and everything's going to be great. Then, you learn about the unintended consequences of it, or how, accepting, getting your kid into this one program then causes problems with some, income limitation somewhere else. Just the how you manage medications on a day-to-day basis, how they have to be stored, who can give them. There are all these, really wonderful things that helps us be better legislators and write better laws that we learn when people come into our office. And over the time I've been here, I've just learned so many of those things. Young guy named Alex Houston, he just wrote me. He's just graduated from college. He came by with his parents with the Epilepsy Foundation at age 14. He came around on a youth lobby day, and we were reminiscing about all the things about epilepsy that he taught me. That I had some basic knowledge of it, but he explained things in ways, and the complications and the challenges and the barriers he faces in everyday situations that I would never have dreamed of. So that kind of thing is worth its weight in gold.
Thank you. A final question I would ask is just what message would you want our Lutheran Day participants to walk away with?
Don't rest on your laurels. And the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and any other saying I could come up with, because people look at the state budget and they say, oh, this is 90-some billion dollars. There's money for everything. And that's not the way it works. And especially if we get into a position where we got to start tightening our belt. Legislators are political animals. And if in our offices, we're hearing a lot from our local school superintendents, oh my God, whatever you do, don't cut, K-12. That message is going to get through. If we're not hearing from human service advocates, the message is, well, geez, there's really not people in our community who are prioritizing this. So, maybe we could make some cuts there. So, whether you're asking for more resources or you're trying to protect the resources you've got, be sure to stay in constant contact with your legislators. Have them out to a facility or over to your church. Talk through these issues, and do it at a time where start doing it at a time where you're not asking for money, and do some relationship building. So when the time comes, you've got to call us up and say, hey, don't cut this or increase that. There's an existing relationship and a sort of basic understanding of what you do. Also, don't think that your voice is too small to be heard. Often people tell me, oh, we didn't call your office because you must get thousands and thousands of calls. And you'd be surprised, particularly now in the social media age, like people will tweet something or put it on Instagram, but the number of people who will actually write us a letter or write us a personal email and tell their own story or how it affects them and their family, or come in and see us, you might have a dozen of those, and those have huge impact as opposed to like your online thing. So yeah, don't underestimate the value of your voice, because I think it's way louder than you might think.